As the saying goes, money is what makes the world go round. But money hasn't always been around. Looking back, history reveals that bartering was widely used for trading. This was no less true in the former Southwest Africa, which is modern-day Namibia. Most indigenous people in all parts of the country traded livestock, especially cattle, for other items they required. In the early days, imperialism and colonialism brought about a general change in the monetary system in this country, when silver and gold coins began to be used as a method of payment. The British pound sterling was the first currency to be introduced. After being colonized by Germany, the German mark was introduced by proclamation in Southwest Africa in 1893. Despite this, throughout German occupation, sterling continued to be used in cross-border trade. During the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s, the development of Southwest Africa was overshadowed by politics and the struggle for liberation. The rest of the world was hesitant to invest in a country whose future was uncertain. Historically too, when African countries gained their independence, often civil war and unrest followed, and the economies of those countries collapsed. These are the events that overshadowed the establishment of the Bank of Namibia. At the helm was the liberation movement, SWAPO, and its leadership, who were preoccupied with the question of preparing Namibia for nationhood.
We consult many friends around the world, and we find Sweden was more open to us as a country. And Prime Minister Olof Palme, who is now deceased, but we honored him with a street here in around the window. So, and he offered us a specialist, a banker, who has helped already many other countries in the region of Southern Africa and in the East Africa. So, and so we planned to meet with him. It was, of course, a top secret because we didn't want to have this leaked out. So His Excellency, Comrade President Hifikepunye Pohamba, was then the Secretary of Finance of SWAPO. So him and I, we went underground, downtown in Rome, Italy. And this is where we met Mr. Carlson. And we discussed in details. He's a banker, he knows what we want and how that could be done. So this is how all the details were laid down first. The bank was planned secretary underground, but the Swedish government, they knew about it.
So that blueprint was already designed there. And also, one of the books that were written before the elections, written under the leadership of or coordination of UNIN, which was, of course, being run by our current president, was also to explore different options on how to set up a central bank. So that conversation started way before independence. So when independence came, so the blueprint was already there. It was a question of implementing that blueprint.
Before Namibia's independence, the country belonged to the Rand monetary area. This meant that it didn't have an independent monetary policy and only had limited control and management of its national wealth. It was essential for the government of an independent Namibia to establish its own monetary system and governing authority as soon as the necessary arrangements could be made.
The most important discussion at the time was that, yes, we are going to have our own currency. And we need to think about, is this going to be a free-floating currency or is it going to be a pegged currency? How are you going to manage it? Because it's all to do with the currency exchange rate, because an exchange rate is really a very important instrument in how to manage the economy. If you have a highly valued currency, obviously you're going to have cheap imports, but you're also going to have expensive exports. And therefore, if you are naturally an importing country, you may wish to have a high-valued currency because then your imports are cheaper. But on the other hand, if you are naturally an exporting country, you probably prefer to have a not so highly valued currency to make your exports cheaper so that people can buy it. The decision was taken, but also we need to now to second at what rate are we going to do that? And it was also then agreed to say we do it on a one-to-one basis. You know, $1 is very equal to 1 South African rand.
So what we need to understand is, why do countries choose to have a common currency or to peg the currency or fix the currency to another country? There are basically 4 key reasons. The first one is to get some trade benefits. The proximity to South Africa, it helps Namibia in terms of its trade. You expect that trade will be much more smoother to have the same currency because you lower transaction cost. The second reason is you want to leverage credibility benefits. You know, most small countries don't have the credibility. If you transact and you do business with big international companies and you have got a currency that people don't actually trust, there are some credibility issues. The fact that you are linked to an anchor that's got more credibility than you have got is very helpful. The other reason why you do is the ability to adjust to external shocks in the system. And from all the work the Bank of Namibia has done so far since I've joined the bank, it tells us that actually the benefits of having our currency linked or fixed or pegged to the South African rand outweigh the cost.
The establishment of a central bank was given a high priority since the country needed such an institution to assist in shaping the economic development programs as provided for in Article 128 of the Namibian Constitution. The Bank of Namibia, in accordance with the Namibian Constitution, is the state's principal instrument to control money supply, the currency, and the institutions of finance. In July 1990, the Bank of Namibia, with a staff component of approximately 45 employees, took over the functions already performed by the Operations Department of the Windhoek branch of the South African Reserve Bank, based in this building, now housing the Development Bank of Namibia.
There was a branch of the South African Reserve Bank that we basically built into a fully fledged central bank. And that branch really, what it was doing then before independence and also at independence was simply issuing the currency, the rand then, which was being issued. They were not doing anything else.
I think that's telling in the sense that, you know, I think it's an important lesson for all of us to learn from, that everything that you see today was created in somebody's mind some times ago. So things just don't happen. Things happen because people sat down, took time to think, and once they have a clear vision, they implement what they had in mind. So I think that's a very important lesson, that you know, for us to be somewhere, we need to envision about that future. We need to have that clear vision, and once we have that clear vision, we start, you know, doing the actual work to implement that vision, and that's exactly what has happened. So that foresight is something that we should cherish, and it's a foresight that we should learn from. That we need to think, have a clear vision, but key is the implementation of that vision.
Giving effect to this undertaking was easier said than done. Systems and processes had to be put in place. Staff had to be hired, and that job fell to the first expatriate governors, Dr. W.L. Bernard, Mr. E. Carlson, and Dr. J. Ahmad, as well as young and capable Namibians called to establish the central bank.
When you're a new country, you are busy with so many other things. You don't always have all the skills how to set up some of these institutions. We were lucky then also to have assistance from some of the global institutions like the World Bank and the IMF, who sent some experts that helped us to set up the central bank. didn't train as a central banker. But then again, really, central banking is not about, you don't really to train for central banking. But I think my journey to the central bank, it was really one of those, I would probably say I was probably just at the right time. I don't know how it happened, but I ended up being considered to be a deputy governor at the central bank. That was way back in 1993.
The reason why I didn't want to join the bank, because the image of the bank was not good. Yeah, they didn't look that professional, and therefore it wasn't very encouraging to join the bank. But since I joined, people worked very hard to change the image of the bank, to change the culture of the bank. Things were so lax when I joined. The annual report will take, the annual report is supposed to be produced 3 months after the end of the financial year. Sometimes it will only be produced at the end of the year, which is practically a year after the financial year, which was a violation of the law. But that was a culture. But since then, people worked very hard to change that culture, to make sure that there's enough discipline in the institution. And from there, the institution was just growing from strength to strength.
And certainly, I can tell you, at the time of independence, we did not have experienced central bankers, so we have to build this from scratch. At that time, people who were in management, possibly 90% were expatriates. And where we are now, I think I'm very proud to say that 99% or even 100% of all the staff of the Bank of Namibia, with our expanded mandate, with all the complicated operations, it is in the hands of the Namibians, something that we are very proud of.
The culture change during all these years was that we have moved from a relaxed culture up to a very diverse culture. So because we were used only certain cultures, but it was quite a highlight to work with all these different cultures. We were not used to it, so that was quite a highlight for me. And then the team building, we learned over the years how to work as a team, because previously you only do what you need to do, but there was no team building, but that was also a highlight for me.
The bank's new headquarters, located on Robert Mugabe Avenue, was constructed over a period of 39 months and completed in 1999. It was officially inaugurated by the then President Sam Nujoma on the 23rd of June 1999.
At some point, the building where we were is the current DBN building. We couldn't fit there, and therefore we needed to build a new building, because then the staff kept growing. Over 200, and I think the current staff is more or less probably, I don't know, 250, 270.
There was no technology. So when we had to communicate, for instance, I was with the South African Reserve Bank. When we have to communicate with South Africa, it was either via letter or telex machines or telephonically. So when you write the official letter, you have to wait 2 weeks or 3 weeks to get a letter answer back, things like that. They introduced systems. Because when I started in the vault, it was big books, everything was manually. So now it's just a question, press a button and you have got all your information.
In 2003, the Bank of Namibia expanded its services to the north of Namibia by constructing the state-of-the-art Oshakati branch. The branch was officially opened by the then Prime Minister and now President Dr. Hage Geingob. Through this expansion, the bank managed to effectively deliver currency management services at a reduced risk to its clients in the northern regions.
We had a lot of cash transactions taking place in the northern region. That would have meant that commercial bank will always then transport the currencies from Windhoek to the northern regions in their own vaults. And sometimes it's a very costly exercise to do that. And therefore it was felt to say, oh, to make it easier for commercial bank to have access to currency, why not really put up a branch there? And the only function they have is really just to distribute currency. They don't do other central banking function as such, but really just to make sure that the region is saved with currency as and when it's demanded.
One of the challenges the bank met early on was to find qualified and experienced central bankers to carry out the tasks entrusted by the Constitution and other legislation. Because there was nobody else performing central banking functions in Namibia, ready-made central bankers were not available in the market. As a result, the bank sought to train them. Once trained, the bank needed to retain them.
Luckily, the central bank was in a position really to do that. And therefore, we train as many people as possible. We expose as many people as possible. And we also understood that we're not only doing that for the central bank. We also knew that the economy somehow, the economy-wide also needed to have some skills. And therefore, it was never really our concern that, we might train people who are going to leave the central bank and go to somewhere else. I think we understood that. But because we're in a position to do that as a state institutions, why not do that and provide a skill to the economy? And I think today, there are a number of people who actually left the central bank. They went to other sectors because of the exposure that they got from the central bank. And I'm quite happy that we were able to do that.
I basically spent my entire working life at the bank. I joined the bank officially as an employee in 2007, but prior to that, the bank has played quite a significant role in my life because I joined in 2003 as a bursary holder. They funded my undergraduate studies at UNAM, so I've had a relationship with the bank even prior to my employment. Since I joined the bank after I left school, I can say the bank has been quite a soundtrack to much of my adult life. I've been here all my life. I have had access and exposure to a number of programs, and a number of much of my career development really has been shaped by the exposure that the bank has given me in terms of both work and as well as the number of private and personal relationships that I've developed in terms of mentorship with people that I have met through my being at the bank.
The bank did very well. I think they excelled in being an institute of excellence. They had a very proper HR approach, which was, of course, managed by the board, through which we afforded every employee in the bank a chance to develop themselves. We assisted them with financial means to develop themselves. We agreed on bursary schemes for not only our own staff, but also staff outside the bank. We shared redundant equipment with schools. So the bank had an active social responsibility policy that reflected in providing chances for its staff, but also outside.
Besides providing the tools of the trade, what was also important was to build a new work culture. Derived from the Eagle mentality, in 1997, the bank went about empowering staff members to adopt the right attitude through the Eagle School, a program designed to inculcate the values of the bank and the lofty vision of a center of excellence. This had a transformative effect in the workplace.
One of the things I believed in then, and which I still believe in, is that, if you have a group of people who are responsible for something, you'll be better served to make that group of people to understand that you are a team, and therefore what I do and what you do, we are only doing because of one objective only. I don't do it independently of what you do. You don't do it independent from what I do. We are simply team members who are striving from the same goal. And therefore, we really make efforts to make sure people understand that We are a team and we depend on each other.
So let's also fully understand why we were established. What is our mission? Those who establish us? Let's go back to the Constitution and see the founding fathers who put the Bank of Namibia in the Constitution. What did they want to achieve with this institution? So, and then we crafted the mission so that we are clear as to what is the bank responsible for, making sure that inflation is low and stable, making sure that the payment system is effective, making sure that the financial institutions, specifically banks, are properly supervised. So we had to go back there and just reflect as to why were we established as an institution. That's the second thing. The third thing was then we need to define some rules around here. What are the norms? What are the don'ts and do's around the bank? Yeah, so and that's what you call the values. And how do we make sure that everybody lives by those values? So that culture change, it was in fact called the eagle culture, or it even had a official name, Umwano Nguvi. So then once that was defined, so we then had to put a program together so that we can remind people, have activities that will remind us of what the corporate charter, in other words, these three things that I have talked about, vision, mission, and values, what it's all about, so that it's deeply inculcated in the psyche of the staff members. So it started way before the Eagle School. The Eagle School was just a build-up on that.
The main roles of the Bank of Namibia are highlighted in the Bank of Namibia Act. Apart from this act, several other laws have imposed duties and granted powers to the bank to carry out certain activities. The combination of these laws has given the bank the following roles: promote and maintain financial stability, overseeing the national payment and settlement systems, issuer of currency, promote price stability, banker to government and commercial banks, managing foreign reserves, and administration of exchange control. The Bank of Namibia makes sure that Namibia's banking institutions and any other financial institutions that may be placed under the supervision of the central bank are safe, sound, and able to withstand any shocks. One of the ways the bank does this is by supervising and regulating commercial banks. This will ensure that in the event of a failure, such a failure will not bring down the entire financial system and the economy at large. At the time of independence, the Namibian banking sector consisted of 5 commercial banks. At the turn of 30 years, the banking sector in Namibia consists of 8 banking institutions, which can be categorized as 7 commercial banking institutions and a branch of a foreign banking institution. Today, Namibia boasts a stable, sound, well-regulated and modern financial system as measured by global standards. This mandate was achieved amidst challenging international and domestic economic conditions in recent years.
We had to also then to start to be the supervisor of the commercial banks, and obviously at the time the commercial bank was supervised from the Reserve Bank. So we then needed also then to train supervisors who can go and supervise how the commercial banks were doing their businesses. So those were really the core, research and then bank supervision. That was really very critical. I recall, for example, a situation where we will send our supervisors to particular banking institutions, and then they'll tell us, no, we can't do that because the Reserve Bank said so. So in their mind, somehow they were still like of the view that they were still, because they were subsidiary of the South African banking institution, they somehow felt that they were still under the supervision from the Reserve Bank.
Since those heady days, the sector has embraced the role of the regulator and supervisor to ensure the sector is compliant to the relevant laws and ultimately works in the interest of Namibians. In this regard, the Bankers Association of Namibia was established in 1997 to create a platform for industry collaboration and engagement with the regulator.
There has been misunderstanding when it comes to words like regulator and police, to an extent that these words comes with fear and acronomy. I can assure you that that's not the case. To tell you the role of the regulator is to spearhead the economy in the right direction by balancing interest of the country, the consumer, and the business at large. And it is through collaboration that any country is successful. Our success in the financial industry is because of the excellent relationship and guidance from our regulator, Bank of Namibia, and this contributed positively to the economic growth of our country. So collaboration and building excellent relationship is key to Bank of Namibia as well as Bankers Association.
Since independence, the country experienced 2 incidents where commercial banks came under distress. One happened in the early 1990s, with the City Savings and Investment Bank being taken up by another entity. And the most recent, the Small and Medium Enterprises Bank, which closed shop.
There will always be financial crisis. There will be bank failures. As I said, in every country, there are histories of bank failures. They were there. They will continue to be there in the future because that's the nature of banking. But you need to design your system in such a way that when there is one particular institution fails, it should not make other institutions to fail. So you need to ensure that there is a mechanism that ensures that the risks of one institution are mitigated so that they do not affect other institutions.
I think the bank possibly in our history, we have not really seen any failure of the bank, maybe except recent. And we also managed to contain it. And that bank is going through liquidation. And that liquidation, of course, is quite gradual. It was not a hard landing, it was a soft landing.
The Bank of Namibia monitors the national payment and settlement system to make sure that its transactions are safe, legal, cost-effective, and timely.
Early 90s, the Namibia's payment system was highly integrated into South Africa. So if you swipe your card, or you go to the ATM and put that card into the ATM, the switch will be in South Africa. So that message will be sent to South Africa to tell the machine here, so give this person money. So usually these things don't happen behind the scene. We don't see these things. But there's a big system behind all those infrastructure. The ATM infrastructure, the post machines, there's a big system behind there. So all those things were happening in South Africa. So we then said, this is a big risk. We cannot have your payment system being managed in a different sovereign country. What if things go wrong there and they just cut you off completely? So let's divorce our payment system from South Africa. The payment system is completely divorced from South Africa, and it's functioning properly. It's not expensive, as we thought.
You may remember when we were talking about the financial system and the payment system, a couple of years back, people were being paid by checks. And when you write a check, and that check belongs to Bank A to B, people used to come together in one room to do the reconciliation. So that is no longer happening. The checks has been phased out, and now we have got a effective and efficient payment system where payment could just be done through the usage of technology.
The Bank of Namibia ensures a stable supply of good quality banknotes and coins within the country. According to the Bank of Namibia Act, the President decides on the monetary unit and its symbols, while approval of the Minister of Finance is required for the denominations, composition, form and design of the national currency.
Each country, have got their symbols, and generally currencies are one of the most important, symbols a country will have. It's something that is used by everybody, and therefore a currency for a country is a real pride.
In 2020, the bank launched the $30 Namibian commemorative banknote in celebration of 3 decades of independence and the smooth transition of power between 3 Namibian presidents to symbolize peace, stability, and progress.
In the past, we introduced commemorative coins, but not banknote. This one was the first one, commemorative banknote of $30. So it is something that we are proud of, to say that really money should reflect. It's a good way to celebrate your history, your achievement as a country, the stability that we have enjoyed for the last 30 years with the Namibian dollar, a legal tender that you can use to pay for goods and services within an economy. And the good thing is that about money is that money circulates in many hands. And our aim was that to make sure that at least each and every Namibian will have access to this $30 commemorative banknote, to make use of it as an instrument of payment and also possibly to keep as a souvenir.
The Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of Namibia decided to keep the repo rate unchanged at 3.75%.
The bank achieves this through the monetary policy. Monetary policy refers to the actions undertaken by the central bank to control money supply and achieve macroeconomic goals. The Bank of Namibia's Monetary Policy Committee is focused on ensuring price stability in the interest of sustainable economic growth.
You know, the role of the traditional central bank, and you have really highlighted that, is basically covering 4 things. First is fiscal support. Secondly is financial stability. Thirdly, monetary support. And fourthly, it's macroeconomic support. If you unpack these, if you look at inflation, the level of inflation in the country, it's probably both inflation and the short-term interest rates, the lowest it has been in an independent Namibia. So you can actually tick that box. If you go and look at financial stability, we have got sound, stable, quite innovative financial system that's one of the best on the continent.
The Bank of Namibia provides banking services to commercial banks and government. As banker to government, the bank is responsible for executing all government transactions domestically and internationally. The bank also manages Namibia's foreign reserves. In the last 3 decades, the level of official foreign reserves was sufficient to meet the requirements of the PEG as well as foreign financial obligations. The Bank of Namibia is responsible for the regulation of inflow and outflow of foreign currency. This assists in the overall management of foreign reserves. In 2012, Namibia adopted the Namibia Financial Sector Strategy, spearheaded by the Minister of Finance. The Bank of Namibia plays the role of coordinator of the strategy. The aspirations of the strategy are to have a financial sector that is transformed into a more competitive, resilient, developed, and inclusive instrument that will contribute to the economy at its highest potential.
I have observed that there have been efforts made to address the ownership of the banking sector, as we know that the banking sector has been predominantly foreign owned, and it is still the case that the majority ownership of many of our banking institutions are foreign, but we have observed the progress that has been made and the policies that have been put in place through the financial sector strategy to address those aspects. Another challenge that is being addressed through the financial sector strategy is the the issue of financing to local enterprises, especially small and medium enterprises that have been challenged to get access to financing. We see that a number of financial institutions, banking institutions specifically, have put up facilities to assist SMEs to have access to funding. But we are still far away in terms of attaining the goal that we need to reach to make sure that SMEs are optimally supported to also optimally contribute to the growth of the economy.
Transformation has indeed been an interesting one. Without me going into too much detail before independence in 1990, but you will agree with me that at that time before independence, there were few people who were having financial solutions. There were few people, for them to have a basic bank account was an exceptional privilege, and the data is there to confirm. The financial service industry was then not deepened as currently the case at the time. The innovation and convenience of information technology was non-existent. Long queues when you have to visit banks was the order of the day at that time. The ownership of banks alone was not even in the hands of the Namibians. I must tell you, there have been a lot of transformation. Today, we are seeing that the banks have made significant improvement when it comes to local ownership. So much so that we have a lot of Namibians now owning significant chunk of shares because many banks are listed on the stock exchange. Access to bank services have improved substantially.
We've come a long way the past 30 years, and we really need to look at the fact that overall we have got a very well-run, sophisticated financial services sector. What is still outstanding in terms of work that we need to do is, one, the transformation of the non-banking financial services sector. The second one is skills development. We still lack serious skills in the financial services sector. And those are skills to do with the new world that's emerging. Those are, we need data scientists, we need data analysts, we need people that are able to write algorithms. We're entering the world of cloud computing. We are entering the world of artificial intelligence. Do we have the skills? Because it can help us in terms of becoming more efficient and effective. That's unfinished business.
In performing its duties, it is vital that the bank cooperates and maintains sound working relations with the Ministry of Finance. As the custodians of monetary and fiscal policy, it is in the interest of the country for both institutions at the apex of economy to work together. The bank also cooperates with relevant regional and international organizations, including other central banks in the region and the continent at large. The bank also works closely with international institutions such as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, with a view to contributing to shaping the economic and financial affairs of the world.
What is not written in any law or so is, of course, the fact that the bank, together with the ministry, managed two financial crises. And I think that is an important aspect that we should not forget. The first one was the 2009-10 crisis, where we had a collapse in growth. We had an immediate liquidity issue. We had pressure on banks, especially on public financial institutions. And together with the bank again, government managed well itself out of that crisis. That was the first crisis. Now the second crisis came then in 2016. And again, if I look back, the 5 years that I was in charge of the bank through being the minister, I'm very satisfied that we managed the crisis very well.
What we need to do is make sure that the good work that we are doing as an advisor to government in terms of research that we are doing, that's cutting edge research, there's best practice, that is really consultative of the country. We need to make sure that that advice is taken on board, it's implemented. That's the part where we need everyone mobilize all the resources so that we can have, at the end of the day, a prosperous Namibia. That's what we are trying to do. We want to support the government in the role they have got as elected people with the technical advice that we are providing.
With recent advances and the interconnectedness of financial institutions, including banks and non-banks, Namibia has also recently modified its legal framework to make it possible for the central bank to be responsible for financial stability in the country. In this regard, the Bank of Namibia Act of 2020 was enacted with the explicit aim of expanding the mandate of the central bank to a macro-prudential oversight role, which extends to the entire financial sector while strengthening the independence of the central bank.
There are two key features in the new Bank of Namibia Act that's worth noting. The first one is the strengthening of the independence of the Bank of Namibia, and secondly is the macroprudential oversight coordinating role that the bank has got. So what do we mean by independence of the Bank of Namibia? Firstly, it refers to the freedom of monetary policy makers to be able to conduct monetary policy without direct political or governmental influence. The more independent the central bank, the more credible it is and the more predictable their decisions, their action and the way they conduct the monetary policy. That's why we have strengthened the independence of the Bank of Namibia. And that's sort of what everybody is trying to achieve nowadays. As far as the macroprudential oversight role is concerned, that talks to or considers how aggregate risks are distributed across financial institutions and across markets and how that evolves over time.
The Bank of Namibia has come a long way since its inception in 1990 and has achieved many successes. While presiding successfully over its mandate during the past 3 decades, it is worth noting that the central bank is undergoing a transformation. However, as it celebrates the milestones which it has achieved thus far, the bank cannot afford to rest on its achievements because the world is continuously changing and evolving. This places a responsibility upon the institution to position itself strategically and be ready to face the challenges ahead with determination.
The first one is fixing the bank. Talks basically one of the most credible institutions we have got. It's working currently. It's about how do we ready the Bank of Namibia for the new century and for the new environment out there. So that's what we need to do. Fix the bank. Secondly, how do we modernize the financial system? That talks to smart regulation. How do we make sure that we have got not only a sophisticated and well-developed financial services sector, but we are regulating that sector in a smart way that commercially it makes sense, it's innovative, it's best practice. That's what we do in terms of modernizing the financial system. And the third one is help with the economic recovery in the country.
Therefore, the bank is repositioning itself for the next 30 years to be a world-class modern central bank, reflected in its processes, systems and staff. The Bank of Namibia will continue to strengthen and sharpen its capacity to fulfill its mandate even better in the years to come.
I think the bank has done a commendable job in terms of pursuing its mandate. First, the bank has emerged as a center of excellence, as an institution. in terms of developing institutional capacity and the capacity of its employees so that it is able to provide sound policy advice to the government that has enabled it to deal with serious challenges in terms of economic growth, restructuring of the economy, and supporting local enterprises in order to contribute to economic growth, as well as addressing social issues. Secondly, in terms of administration of monetary policy, notwithstanding the fact that there are limitations in regard to flexibility because of our membership to the Common Monetary Area and the pegging of the currency to the South African rand, the bank has done a commendable job in ensuring that the policy in regard to interest rate and inflation control has been supportive of macroeconomic stability and economic growth. Then when it comes to the regulation of the banking sector, it has also done a commendable job. I think that is visible by the structure of the banking sector, the way it has developed. I think it's second only to South Africa in sub-Saharan Africa in terms of the profitability of the banks, in terms of their prudential management and their resilience to external shocks. They have weathered a number of storms, including the latest financial and economic crisis that had hit the world. And then in terms of ensuring that the financial institutions, the banking sector especially, operate in a manner that supports economic development, I think it has also done a commendable job, although we can still build on what we have achieved to achieve more.
Well, I think I would probably just again to again congratulate the bank for celebrating the 30th anniversary. It's an institution that has come of age. It's an institution that I think we are all proud of as Namibians. It's an institution that has developed leadership. If you look everywhere, you will find people who are running institutions in the private sector, in parastatals. Most of them have worked for the Bank of Namibia. I can close my eyes and count 20 already. So I think the bank should continue to play that role, to churn out leaders that are going to help to transform Namibia. And the bank should not forget that comes from its vision to be a center of excellence. And so that vision and that corporate value, the corporate mission needs to be preserved. While everything else is going to change, I think that should be preserved. So in fact, they say that successful institutions always preserve that core, its vision, mission, and values. And while you are preserving the core, you are stimulating progress.
But yeah, here we are 30 years later. We can actually say the Bank of Namibia is probably one of the institutions in the country that have lived up to its mission and visions.
Individuals, employees with so much passion and commitment in the bank. That's a big asset for this country. What we need to do is we need to refresh the employee value proposition. We need to invest in the development, particularly on the leadership side of these talent that we have got, to unleash the full talent, not only for the benefit of the bank, but for the benefit of the entire country.
The Bank of Namibia will continue to be at the forefront and take the lead in implementing monetary policy, safeguarding financial stability, and promoting economic development in Namibia.